what's happened with this new administration is something that I think it's safe to say most people in the Bitcoin community never really imagined would happen so quickly. And I want to go through and talk about what has happened and then a little bit about what we can expect from the price as a result. So first of all, Donald Trump is, he was the first president, even though he wasn't at office at the time, to speak to a Bitcoin audience at a Bitcoin conference. One of the things that he said is that Bitcoin could be part of a strategy to pay down the national debt, the $35 trillion debt. Most people know that our interest payments on the debt is right now exceeding our national defense budget. And so Donald Trump went on to say it's a tremendous asset with untapped potential. So, having a president starting to see the merits of Bitcoin is a very powerful thing for the cryptocurrency industry. And the thing about Bitcoin is that it takes a long time to really get it. And what I've seen is that the more we learn about Bitcoin, the more we like it. And it's just that simple. And what's happened with Donald Trump, if you follow for the last couple of years, 2, 3 years ago, he was on camera saying, I like the US dollar. I don't like Bitcoin. But one thing led to another. He's got people around him that are teaching him, and he's all of a sudden starting to get what's going on. This is something that the Bitcoiners have had, their sights set on for a long time. But it's nice to see some of the leaders of our country seeing the same thing. So JD Vance, there's a lot of different things that can be said, but when push comes to shove, in 2022, JD Vance basically reported that he owns between $100,000 and $250,000 of Bitcoin. That's closer to $1 million today, maybe $500,000 to $1 million. For a guy like JD Vance, that's very material asset. He's someone, that we can assume as a result is a pro. He's going to support Bitcoin and crypto legislation, which is a very big deal. RFK owns, he is on record saying that he's purchased 14, I think, or 15 Bitcoin. And he has pledged to protect Americans' right to own and use Bitcoin, viewing it as vital for privacy and protection. He supports tax incentives, and he is on the right side of the track. So he's someone who gets the vision and is, definitely in support of regulatory clarity, which is, really what's important for all of the tremendous amount of capital that has been waiting to flow into Bitcoin and the crypto market to happen. Without the regulatory clarity, a huge amount of capital is at a stalemate, is not allowed to come into the market. But with regulatory clarity, all of a sudden, more assets than we can imagine are able to flow into the asset. And the final thing that I want to talk about is Senator Cynthia Lummis. She has introduced something called the Bitcoin Act, and she proposes that the U.S. create a strategic Bitcoin reserve and aims to pass a law that gets the U.S. to create a Bitcoin reserve of 1 million coins, or 5% of the outstanding supply, and store it in a decentralized treasury vault system. So she is not only seeing the value of the asset, but also the value of the technology. So with all these political leaders understanding what the Bitcoin community has understood for over 10 years, and I always thought it was going to take another 10 years for this technology to make its way into the political spheres, but it's all of a sudden happened with this administration. So what does that mean for the price of Bitcoin? Well, typically Bitcoin goes in cycles, right? So we have a bull market and a bear market. Throughout its life, it's had about 2 years of down and about 2 years of sideways and up, right? Sideways down, sideways up. So this chart here shows the last 3 bull market cycles, and it shows where we are. Now, we're closer to 100,000. I put this chart on this deck 6 months ago, so we're closer to 100,000, but you can see that in this cycle we could, if we follow the trends of the past, we could be on our way to 250,000 or so. I tend to think it's a little bit lower, and I'll show you why, but the price is not really the question. It's really a question of the timing for me. So when you look at this chart, this is actually a similar chart to the one before in terms of timing. It goes from 2011 to current, actually to through 2026. And if you look at all the yellow segments of this chart, we're now coming to the end of the current yellow segment, which is 2024. But you can see in 2012, we had a nice run. In 2016, we had a nice run. In 2020, we had a nice run. And in 2024, we're having a nice run. Then typically the red zone is when the up market or the bull market starts to come to a conclusion, and then it's followed by a sell-off. You can see the blue zone, as always, has that sell-off, and the sell-off historically has been around 80%. If we see an 80% sell-off in this next bear market, it is clearly presenting a generational buy opportunity. So for me, what I'm looking for is to hold on to risk until, let's say September, June, July, August. So August, September of 2025 would be the time when I would seriously consider, and many, many people are going to be looking to take risk off the table. And then that typically leads to that blue, sell-off period in 2026, which will potentially lead to an incredible buy opportunity. This chart I've had in my deck since about June, and based on the in-depth studies of the past cycles, I created what I'm looking at as a sell zone and a price level. But more important than the price level for me, it's the timing of September, October of 2025 for, an opportunity to take risk off the table. I think with the current administration, it could go a little bit further, especially if the U.S. if the Bitcoin Act passes and the U.S. starts purchasing Bitcoin. I think a lot of the other central banks around the world will also be purchasing Bitcoin, and it could extend the bull market. But I tend to think toward the end of October, we will see some news events and some media that basically lead people to taking risk off the table for Bitcoin. And what's one of the most interesting things that I've noticed is that in my viewing Bitcoin price and technical levels, right, psychological levels in the price, the media narratives always follow suit. So it's just so interesting how the big money has control of the media, and the media just happens to follow suit and happens to follow the typical price patterns that you see in these assets. When you study them deeply, you get to know kind of where the buy levels and where the sell levels are. And then ironically, the media narratives tend to follow. And it's something interesting. And we'll see how it plays out. Okay, so this is a chart that I think is very interesting. And this is why I tend to think that we won't see, that we will see more buy opportunities. What this chart shows that is from the beginning, from the 2012 cycle to the 2016 cycle and the 2020 cycle, basically we see more muted upside. So the upside is still there, but it tends to diminish as more and more market participants get involved with the asset. So based on the trajectory of this pattern, meaning that the 2012 cycle had enormous run to the upside. The 2016 had enormous run, and the 2012 had lower run. It was a diminishing return, so to speak. This chart, based on looking at the percentage differences over time of each cycle, this chart predicts that we see a peak of 108,000. Now, the past is never a guarantee, but it's interesting to just look at the facts, right? Here, the facts say we're on our way to 108. And then if you compare that to the idea that the institutions really do want as much meat on the bone so they can make as much money in the asset as possible, they don't really want it to run too fast. They want the narrative to build. They want to make money on the volatility, get the retail involved, and eventually sell all their Bitcoin to the retail up into the multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars, and then buy into the fear when the down markets come, and then do the same thing on the converse. So I hope this helps. If you have any questions, this is something that I help people with, how to purchase Bitcoin, how to understand it, how much to allocate to it, and then how to store it. one thing when you're buying Bitcoin, you don't want to store it on exchanges. You want to own your Bitcoin. It says not your keys, not your coins, right? So if you don't own your private key, in other words, if you have your Bitcoin on exchange, they have your private key. They control your coins. They're not really your coins. It's like having a stock. You're missing an enormous benefit of being able to control your own asset. And I even have, access to helping people hold their own assets in IRA accounts, and you know, a lot of different advantages that I've learned over the years. So if there's anything I can do to help you, please DM me, and I hope this helps.